Okay, guys, so this is another From the Vault video. I do have possibly some affiliate links. They'll be in the description box. That would mean I make a small commission if you were to use those links, excuse me. But I love this kind of rag quilt. I did use some embroidery to embroider a name on it. You don't have to do that at all. You can just get some pieces of flannel and make your own quilt with batting, without batting. It's a real old school thing. This is at least 12 years old, so enjoy.
Okay, hi everyone. I'm starting today my long overdue tutorial on how to make a rag quilt. And if you're not familiar, if you didn't see my intro to rag quilt about 5 months ago, I'm so sorry it took me so long. It's just that we moved like a month later and I've been settling in, and even my batting, my quilt batting is still put up just still in boxes. So I'm not using any batting, and generally in California, well, where I come from in California, it doesn't get that cold, so I like to make my rag quilts without batting. But this is what a rag quilt looks like. This is a baby quilt I had made for my son, so it's a couple years old already. And as you can see, the more you wash it, just the funner it becomes, and it gets more frilly on these little areas here. And now that he's bigger, he looks at this and he tells me that's Jolly Roger, and it's kind of funny because he watches Peter Pan and Jake and the Neverland Pirates, so he calls it Jolly Roger and the anchor and stuff. So he still uses this and loves his blanket. What you're going to want for your blankets are flannel. And if you were to use batting, you're going to need some batting also, depending on the size you're making. I'm making a baby quilt, is what I'll be showing you in this actual tutorial for a friend of mine. The patches are going to be larger than this one. This one, I believe, has, I want to say like 5-inch patches. The one I'll be making has 6-inch patches, so as far as the blocks themselves. So the larger your block, the less you're going to need to get the size of quilt you want. This one, like I said, smaller patches, and I did them in 6 by 7, so I think is what I did. I can't quite recall. It might be 7 by 7, 2, 4. Yeah, so this is a square. It was 7 patches long and 7 patches wide, or blocks as they call them. I just call them patches. But and on the back, the quilt looks perfectly aligned like any other quilt. It's just nice and lined up. Okay. So we'll get started. I just want to kind of show you what the quilt looks like, and right now what I'm going to do in this section of the tutorial is just show you what you're going to be needing, and just so you can get your supplies together. So this is just how I keep my sewing supplies. This is basically a Hello Kitty train case, but it's for, you know, other things, generally probably for makeup, but this is how I keep all of my supplies for my sewing. One of the basic things you might need, and if you really want, is one of these chalk markers. This might be a Primmed Ritz one, I'm not sure what brand. You don't need to have this, it's not 100% needed, but what you're going to do with this is, if you decide when you put your patches together that instead of just having an X holding them together, if you want to do like a heart shape or a star or something else decorative, you might want to have one of these chalk pens so that you can write on your fabric. Like if I write on this, it's going to be washed away. You can barely even see it, but it's going to wash away when I do wash my fabric. So this is a chalk pen with dressmaker's chalk in it, and you can find things like this at Joann's. I'm not sure if Michael's carries it. Walmart has it. So like I said, if you need to do more advanced designs, you can do that. Pins, of course, I have lots of pins. This is just a few to hold your blocks together for when you sew them, that you have better placement. I think that's all that I have in here that you're going to be needing. I knew I already had another one. You're going to need a rotary cutter or just scissors. Rotary cutters are much easier to work with to cut your fabric, because all you're going to do is, along with your rotary cutter, you need a couple things. You're going to need a ruler, which you're going to need a ruler anyway to measure your fabric. This is an Omnigrid ruler. It's a pretty large one. I think it's 6 by 24 inches. They sell them in lots of different sizes. The larger they go, the more expensive they are, but you can get a smaller one, and they're always on sale, it seems like every other week. So you can always get these on sale. They carry them at Walmart. Joann's is usually where I buy mine. I have several different sizes of these. And then you need a self-healing mat, or a rotary cutting mat, they call them. This is one by June Taylor, and I think this one was super cheap. It was like $10. And you really want the largest mat you can get for your money, because if you get a smaller mat and you go to cut your fabric, you're going to end up having to move the fabric down or whatever it is to accommodate for that smaller mat. So if you can get a larger mat, at least that's the longest, maybe 24 inches. A 36-inch mat is even better, because that's generally your yards of fabric come, well, generally a yard of fabric is 36 inches. So if you can get a good 36-inch mat and then go from there, that would be preferable. If you don't have these things and you just have scissors, well, you can go ahead and cut with scissors. It's just going to take a little bit longer, and maybe your blocks aren't going to come out as straight. But for this type of quilt, this straight edge of your block isn't that important because it's going to be cut up anyway, and then it's going to kind of wash away. So this is a good beginning quilt because you're going to learn some about quilting, or about piecing your pieces at least. And it's not too difficult, okay? And then there's a little fudge factor, a little fudge room in there if you kind of mess up a little bit, okay? So I'm gonna put this. You're gonna need thread coordinating for your fabric, for your front and, well, for the front and the back of your fabric, obviously. Whatever it is that you're gonna choose. I'm probably gonna be using this beige and some green because I've already done that with the other patches. I've sewn a few of them just to get it started. And a sewing machine. I have mine back here under its case. I have a Brother. I got this at Costco actually a few years ago, and it's a really good machine. I have several machines, but this is the one I use when I'm just doing regular old sewing, everyday kind of stuff. And the fabric, that's the fun part. So I always get my fabric pretty much at Joann's. It's always going to be on sale. I like to say always, apparently, but it's on sale. It's the flannel print fabrics. Sometimes they call it snuggle flannel print fabrics. You don't want the pajama flannel because that has a little different consistency to it. This is just flannel, what they call flannel print. And they have plain flannels. I like the printed ones because even the one that's like this is considered a print. So you're going to need, what I'm making today, like I said, is a baby blanket. And mine, let's see here. My baby blankets, I usually like to make them about either 5 blocks by 6 blocks, wide or large, or 6 by 6 would be a square, or 6 blocks by 7 blocks, which would be another size rectangle. And I have some notes here my son kind of drew on them. Generally 5 by 6 is going to be a little bit oblong, a 6 by 6 is going to be a square, and a 6 by 7 is going to be a little bit longer. And since my patches are going to be 6-inch blocks, the one that we make for the tutorial will actually end up being 30 by 36 inches, okay? So the blanket's not going to be huge, it's a baby blanket. If you want it larger, all you have to do is add more blocks one way and more blocks the other way, okay? So we'll talk a little more about that when we get there. But if you're making this blanket, you'll need about 1.5 yards of each fabric. So what I mean by that is you're going to need 2 fabrics that coordinate. And so I chose this little monkey print. It's cute. So 1.5 yards of the monkey print fabric and 1.5 yards of this green like tie-dye. And I always end up getting the tie-dye one just because if you get a plain color, it's kind of flat. It's funner to have some movement in your quilt. It's just a cuter print. And they have this stuff at Costco, at Walmart, and at Joann's. Hancock Fabrics, around here at Beverly's, they have it too. Everyone carries, it seems like, this kind of fabric. And this comes like in yellow and greens and blues and purple, pink, reds, all this kind of weird like tie-dye looking thing, or mottled fabric, should I say. So like this is the blue one, and it seems to look the same at every place you go. So this is the blue one, there's the green. I actually have yellow and pink and purple somewhere else in here, but and that's what I chose to coordinate with this little monkey print. So if your fabric generally comes in 44-inch wide fabric, and if you know about fabric, you know what I'm talking about. If you're not sure, when you go check out your fabric on the bolt, there'll be this big huge white thing in the middle here. It's called a bolt. It'll say if it's 44 inches wide or 60 inches wide. And I believe this is, I can't really tell in there. Okay, so if it's 21 inches, so this is 44-inch fabric. So on a 44-inch wide piece of fabric, you need 1.5 yards of each fabric, okay? So what I'd like to do is kind of probably stop there for right now, because what we'll be doing next is cutting our fabric and then we'll start sewing. So I think this is a good place to stop, and if you need to, pick up those things from the store, like I said, you need 1.5 yards of each of your fabrics. Well, I already have all the pieces for my quilt cut, but I think sometimes people want to see every step, especially when you're starting out. So what I'm going to do is show you how I cut my fabric. Now, when they give you your fabric, it's going to be off of a bolt, and it's folded in half. So you're going to have your two fabrics, basically the two sides folded together, okay? And generally what I do is I try to square it up as best I can, and by that what you mean is, you see this edge where they cut it, it's kind of jagged. I don't know if you can see that. It's kind of crazy looking. So what you're going to do, and I line it up better from the fold mark where it's folded, because for me, I think that's the straight line, because if you line it up from down here, start as this being your registration point, you see how this one's lower, that one's higher, it's kind of off. And although yes, these lines should be straight, I don't generally work with that. So what I'm going to do is I put the my fabric down in the corner of the cutting mat. Let me see if I can show you that better. Right down here, and I'll just line it up there and let the fabric line up with that very bottom edge, okay? So that way I know that that's going to be straight. And I go past the 0 mark, this last mark here, because whatever is on the opposite side of that is going to be crooked, you know, so that's what we're going to be cutting off. So I just like to kind of line it out. A lot of people wash their fabric and then press it. I don't do that, but if for quilts where I know it's going to be a big quilt or this big heirloom project, then yeah, I would take the time to do all those things. With this kind of thing, it's just kind of cute, it's easy, it's quick. I don't require that. At least for me, I just don't think that's required. So I'm going to line that up, and then I'm going to take my big ruler and I'm going to push it all the way to the end so that it's meeting that last mark where it marks 0. And I line it up with the 0 and its little notch mark down here at the very bottom. And I'm going to keep it straight and go all the way up to this top mark. Now for me this is counterintuitive because usually I want to cut on the right side of the ruler. I'm cutting on here. Whenever you cut on this other side. For me, on this one, just to not have to move it around too much, I go ahead and cut on the opposite side over here on the left. Generally, it's just because if I put this over here, I don't have a lot of grip to push down. It's not that bad, but you know, I still have to cut here, and then maybe my fabric's going to shift. So it takes a little more work to do it this way because I'm going to have to really hold on to it nice and tight. And what I mean by that is push down on my ruler as I cut, okay? So I'm going to be cutting with the hand that I usually don't cut with. And when I showed you guys you're going to need a fabric or a rotary cutter, I put it away. So let me bring that out. And this one is just some Fiskars. I've had this one for probably 15 years and it works just as good today as it did, you know, when I bought it. And you just have to switch out your trimmer, the little wheel, when it starts getting dull. So I'm going to try to do this without blocking the camera, so that's going to be even harder for me. But I'm going to hold down the ruler and butt up right against to the ruler, okay? And as I push, it's cutting the fabric off, okay? And now I'm scoring up my fabric so that it's nice and straight. And what you want to do is just make sure you're holding your ruler down and pushing it along, okay? What's cool is if you do 6-inch blocks is that this ruler is already 6 inches wide. From here, I can just cut the next strip and then cut the next strip and just keep going. The thing is I need 7-inch blocks because that's how I used my, that's how I made my pattern. So I'm just going to move over to measure 7 inches on my cutting mat. And at the very bottom of the cutting mat there are numbers, and I can use that to help me with that. So we still have it nice and squared up. I'm going to go over to the 7-inch mark, line it up, and now I'm going to hold it down. And again, get your rotary cutter and just cut right along that. Now if you were using scissors and you didn't have a rotary cutter, you're still going to need some kind of ruler to measure this out. So if you were to do that, you can measure your 7 inches. You would take your dressmaker's chalk. I left it over there. I'm just going to act like I'm doing this. So let's say this is my dressmaker's chalk. I'm going to go ahead and mark it with my chalk. And then I'm going to get my regular scissors, just whatever scissors you have that you use to cut fabric with. And then I'm going to come in and cut that by hand, okay? So it's the same thing, just rotary cutters are so much easier. Okay, so I would cut as many strips as I need, and generally if you're doing a 1.5 yard fabric, just cut all 7 inches across the whole length of your fabric, okay? So now I'm going to turn my fabric, and I will do it this way so that you can kind of see better, so that these two loose ends are facing you. Now this is where my tutorial might be different from a perfectionist tutorial. Generally what you would want to do, like I said, for a quilt that's going to be, you know, held on to forever, and I'm not saying this isn't, but this one, since you're going to cut the edges, the very edges of it, it doesn't really matter if it's perfect or not. I would trim off these two you're gonna have this is still folded, remember, so now you still have two thicknesses of your fabric. You would line this up just like I did before, but this time I would line it up maybe along this long line. Just pick a line there that you would like to line it up with. And then you're gonna come in and trim off whatever is not straight on those two edges. But like I said, since this is, you know, something I'm gonna cut up anyway and it's gonna get all frilly, it doesn't really matter. I am going to just move away from that. Well, you know what, I'll show you. I'm just being lazy. It's the same thing. So all you do is just kind of move it past the 0 so that the two open flaps are lined up, and just cut that off. That's just an extra step. I mean, it took a second. For me, I'll just start cutting. So now we're gonna move up, and every 7 inches, we're going to cut this fabric. And I leave mine doubled up for a reason, and I'll show you why. It's just easier that way. How I have this 7-inch square, and it already has the same coordinate as the insides of it, and on the back it's green also. And now I don't even have to pin this. When I go to sew it together so that I can sew together my quilt, they're already the way they should be. Because let me show you on a different one. For each patch you're gonna have a front and a back, and it's just sewn together. And then from there you're gonna build your blocks, sew them together so that you have your pattern. So here is one of the 7-inch blocks that I'm gonna need. Front and back already put together. I can either move this back down to 0 or just from here go to 14 inches and cut another. Now I have my second block. And from each of the pieces, what you're going to need is 30 blocks total for this blanket. So I need 15 of the green and 15 of the pattern, okay? 15 of them. So here we are again, and I'm going to go over to cut my 7 inches. And there we go. So from one strip of the 44-inch wide fabric, from one 7-inch strip, I am able to get 3 of my blocks. So if you do the math, you're going to need 5 strips to get 15 blocks of your green. And then you're going to go through and do the same with your, I'm just calling it green because it's green on mine, and then my monkey print fabric, I'm going to need 15 of these also. And it's going to be exactly the same. Just do the same process I just showed you, but with your print fabric. And you're going to need 15 monkey prints, blocks, or whatever your main print is, and then 15 of the green. Okay? And I will leave it at this because this is just the part that we're going to need to cut, and that's all you're going to need. So like I said, 15 of each one. And in the next section, we will start sewing them together, okay? We're almost there. It's a really quick tutorial, really quick workup for a little quilt like this. Okay, so now we have our 6 strips of 5 blocks each. As you can see, they're all together. And the quilt is getting smaller and smaller. I don't know if you've noticed that as we've been putting it together, because you're losing an inch every time you sew these together, because you have ½ inch on each one that you're bringing in together, so you're losing an inch at each junction. So now this next one, now it's up to you. Like I said, if you're a perfectionist, what you would do is actually iron these every time so that it has the best amount of stretch, and it's nice and laid out. Like I said, I don't really do that with this flannel fabric, and just because of the nature of the quilt, it doesn't really require that. But if you want to, you can do that, so it's nice and ironed out. It looks perfect. These next sets, what you're going to do is these 2 guys, we're going to sew them together. These 2 guys are going to get sewn together, and these last 2 are going to get sewn together. And they are going to get sewn together back to back, alright? So the backs of the quilt together. So we're going to pick up the strips so that the backs are together. If you can see that. And this time when I pin it, I'm going to try to close up as best I can for you on the table there, because this is a longer strip, and you want to quilt it or pin it so that at each junction where this one has its seam, you want to line that up exactly with the other seam, so that way when you're all done, you have perfect seams where they meet up, and it's going to look really cool on the back. Otherwise it looks kind of sloppy. So I'm going to put these together, put them on my table, and show you how I pin that. Okay, so I hope to make this as clear as I can. So when this was laying on the floor, it was like this. So we have our little monkey, green monkey, and then we have the green monkey print, right? So we're going to bring these together so that the 2 backs You know what I'm saying? Just like when I was picking up the other ones, you just pick them up so the two backs face each other. Okay. Oops. And maybe, so now both my quilt backs are facing each other. I'm just going to put it down. This is the seam that we're going to be sewing right up here, okay? So what I'm going to do is hold them together and kind of, you know, pull them taut, kind of get them so that they're both the same length. They should be about the same length. If they're way off, then something happened in the sewing, you know, but if you're doing your 1/2 inch seam allowance every time, these should be the exact same length. Now where I first start pinning is I kind of look to see that the squares are both kind of lined up together, and this looks pretty good. So what I'm going to do is pick up this first seam, kind of pick it up and hold it in my hand, and I'm going to try to close up for you so that you can kind of see what I'm doing better. Okay, so I'm holding them both in my hand. Now I'm going to put one seam to face one way and the other one to face the other way. It doesn't matter which way as long as they're facing opposite. You can do it this way, you know, as long as one's laying down in one direction, the other one's laying the other way. You don't want them both laying in the same direction. That's a lot of bulk to sew through. You're going to sew through, like, I don't even know how many fabrics that is. It's 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 layers of fabric if you do it that way. So push one way, push one the other way. It doesn't matter which way. And sometimes I just go with what the fabric wants to do. It feels like at this time it wants to go this way. So that's what I'm going to do. And so I'm still holding them. I'm going to get a pin. I'm going to get my pin. And I'm going to stick the pin right into the seam and coming right back out. Okay? So that is going to hold it together right at that seam. So when I sew over that, that seam is going to meet up perfect and it's going to look awesome on the back side. On the furry side, like I showed you on the sample, it doesn't really matter. You can't tell if something's lined up right or not because it's this big furry stuff, right? But on the back side, you sure can't tell because it has to have nice crisp. This isn't the best one example, but they meet up a lot better. Okay? So on this one, as you can see, I didn't do the best job. I probably wasn't pinning because sometimes I'm lazy, I don't pin. But you see what I mean? Where on the back side, you want it to look really nice. So we're going to go over to the next one. Nice, keep it nice and taut. Hopefully that's in frame. Okay, so this time it feels like this one wants to go this way, this one wants to go the other way. And that's fine. You know, as long as you have one facing one way, one facing the other, as far as the seam itself, you're good. Okay, and you're going to go along and pin all of the seams like that. Okay. And I just have one more. And you really want those seams to meet up and then that edge to be pretty straight. Other than that, you know, you're pretty good. So I'm going to back up and we're going to go to the sewing machine. So we're going to start sewing that seam where I just put the pins. We have our pins in here. 1/2 inch again. And we're just going to do this 3 times, right? Because we have the 3 sets that we need to sew together of these long strips. And then from there, we're going to sew those together with the other ones as far as making your quilt, because you got to get them all sewn together, right? So let me start with this. I just changed my bobbin, so hopefully everything's okay. Let's see here. Yeah, we're good. So, oh, and by the way, I would put more pins in than other than just the ones that go in the seam. I generally would pin within the fabric itself, because just to hold it a little tauter, I didn't do that, and I probably should have shown you all, but it's the same like we were pinning the other little blocks together. Just put pins maybe every 2 or 3 inches. Okay. And I'm going to pull this pin out. I only pull it out when I get there. Now when you get to the actual seam, it might be a little bulky, but it shouldn't be too bulky, because like I said, if you push one way, push one the other, you should have a lot less bulk. When you get there, if you just need it, just sew. I mean, your machine should take it in. Just like that. Okay? Keep sewing. If for some reason your fabric starts kind of buckling where it has more pushed up in front like this little bump, if you kind of smooth out that ridge and kind of help it push in, you're going to get a better edge. And sometimes what happens is I'll pick it up like this and let that seam kind of relax itself. What happens is sometimes when you have your feed dogs, the feed dogs are pulling your fabric through, but the top there is nothing like that. So when you have a couple layers of fabric, the bottom one's getting pulled through at a constant rate, but the top one you're going to have to push, and a lot of times what happens is it ends up, sorry, so what I was saying is it just gets bunched up and you want to kind of ease that in. So especially when you're getting to your seam, you're going to push that seam in there. If it's not wanting to take it in real easily, push it in. And keep in mind your 1/2" seam allowance, okay, don't forget that. If this one, like this one started turning, a little piece of fabric turned in, I'm just gonna open it up and lay that down. And keep pushing. Now I'm getting to another seam. Push it right through. And here's our last seam. And again, what happens is sometimes when the one's facing towards the machine, like going into it, you just want to make sure it's going in nice and smooth. That's the one that will get bunched up also. So we're going to keep pushing through, and we're almost done with this strip. And then I'm going to do the other 2 strips exactly the same, okay? So when I do the other 2 strips, we'll come back and I'll show you what that looks like, and then we have to do a couple more seams after that. Okay. Still getting smaller, getting smaller. This time we have our sets of 2 rows, 5 blocks, wide. So now we still have to sew these guys together, right? We gotta sew this one to this one, and this one to the back of this one. So what I'm gonna do the same thing like I just showed you what I did with those other strips. Is I'm gonna join them together, back to back. And this time I'm not going to show the pinning, it's exactly the same. I'm just going to put the pins in where the 2 seams meet. Put your pin, seams, pin, and same thing. Make them alternate so one seam's laying down flat one way, the other one's laying down flat the other way. And when I'm done with that, then I'm going to have a piece that is 4 strips sewn together. Then I'm going to have to sew those last 2 strips to that big chunk. Okay, so I'll show you what that looks like after I sew this strip together. I have sewn those 2 sets together. Now we have this larger piece that has 4 strips, right? These are our strips, the 4 strips by 5. Now we have this last piece left. And once we're done with this, your quilt is done. We're going to quilt, we're not going to quilt, we're going to stitch a 1/2" seam allowance all around the edges because you still have these open flaps, okay? These are just kind of open there. Alright, so I'm going to, again, pick them up, back of this one, back of this guy, pick them up. I'm going to pin those together and also sew them just like we did with the strips when we put them together. You guys know I have to show you everything. Even when I didn't show you that last piece of stitching, I was like, oh man, I should show everything. So this is what we just did. Like I said, we picked up that piece of 4, that bigger chunk that we still need to add the last 2 strips to, okay? So they're back to back. Again, I'm going to pin them at every seam so that one of the seams is going to the left and one is going to the right, okay? So I'm just going to match those up, making sure that the rest of the blanket itself is lined up pretty good, okay? You want to make sure the whole thing is lining up the way you want it so that you don't end up with a crooked blanket. Let's see here, that's about good. Okay, so I have my one seam facing left, the other one's facing the other direction, and I'm going to pin it there. And these 2 guys, let's make sure they bump up right to each other. And pin there. And by now you guys are becoming pros. If you're following along, I mean, it's basically the same thing with lining up your seam allowances and pinning. And like I said, if you want to pin a little more because you just want it to be nice and straight, you would just go in after a couple inches and put your pin. A couple inches, put your pin, okay? Right now I'm doing them on the seam allowances. Or the seams. Okay. Last pin. Oh, that one's okay. And now we're going to go back to the top of my needle. And while we're here, like I said about the feed dogs pulling in your fabric, that's what pushes your fabric across. Like right now I'm not even touching it, the fabric's moving, right? If you want it to be more steady for the top fabric, you can also pull it from behind, okay? As you're holding it, if you pull it, not too hard, but just guiding your fabric through, that'll help you a lot also with that bulk and trying to keep that down without it kind of puckering up like it does sometimes, okay? And again, 1/2" seam allowance. And just get it done. And this is actually the last bit of putting it actually together. And then we're going to, like I said, sew 1/2" seam or 1/2" allowance all around the thing. That one was a little bit crooked. As far as the fabric behind this one was shorter than it should be. I kind of fudge that one a little bit. Like I said, it has a lot of fudge factor here. There's a little fudge room, should I say. All right. And keep pushing her through. We're almost done. And like I said, I'm not the world's best quilter. I like to do things that are fun and fast, and I've given these out for gifts for lots of different occasions, mostly baby showers, and people love them, especially when you put the child's name on it. That's kudos, a lot of points there. All right, let's see here. Okay, that is the last bit. I'm gonna lay it out just so you can kind of see what it looks like. That looks like. It's all sewn together. Everything's put together. This is the front. What we're gonna do is come around the whole edge of the blanket and do a 1/2 inch seam allowance. And when we're done with that, we're gonna start snipping into the fabric into these seams, and that's what's gonna make the frill when you actually wash your quilt. Okay. I just want to show you the back of it, and the back is nice and pristine, just like the front's gonna be kind of crazy, but the back is gonna be nice and plain. And as you see, it looks really nice, right? So that's just what, you want to pin your thing so that you have these nice squares. And they're not going to be some weird rectangle or something kind of crazy. It's what it should look like, and that they're meeting up pretty much point to point. And if they're not, it's a handmade gift, so big deal, right? So just do your best, and right now we're going to go to the machine, do a 1/2 inch seam allowance all around, then we'll start cutting, and we are done. So this part shouldn't require any pinning. I don't see why it would, but we're going to start any corner. Just pick up your blanket, and you can start in the middle, at the corners, whatever it is. And you're going to want your seams again facing up so that you can see what, these crazy seams, what they look like, where they're at. And we're just going to start in one corner and put down your presser foot about a 1/2 inch in from the edge of your fabric. I don't know if you can see that. I brought the fabric in so that already 1/2 inch of it is kind of sticking out behind the needle, okay? Because we're gonna put a 1/2 inch seam all around. I don't really want the seam to come in at the very end there. So I'm just gonna put down my presser foot, so I have 1/2 inch from the side of the presser foot and 1/2 inch behind the needle. Place my needle down. So maybe you can see it better if I show you. It's kind of hard to see. It's just hanging in there, okay? 1/2 inch in, 1/2 inch from the side. And we're gonna go around the whole perimeter of the blanket and just do a straight stitch all straight through. I didn't really talk about the stitching too much. It doesn't, like as far as your straight stitch, if it's, two, or what position, as far as, what's the word, how long you want them. You want a shorter stitch. You don't want it to be like too huge, but it really doesn't make a difference. So whatever straight stitch your machine does, its basic function, do that, okay? And we're just gonna go up a little bit, and then I'm gonna reverse a little bit because I want to reinforce that stitch. I don't want that opening up, okay? We didn't do that throughout the quilt because there's so many seams and going back and sewing over it that it doesn't matter. It's not gonna make a difference. So I didn't reinforce any of the seams other than this one, okay? So now we're gonna go forward again and just 1/2 inch all around your quilt. When you get to a seam, sorry, oh, so sorry, my quilt's just hanging out over here. When you get to a seam, you either need to choose, do I want to push the seam towards me or do I want to push it up? Okay, I like pushing them towards me because it goes through the machine easier. So I'm just gonna pull it this way. There's a thread here I don't care about. I'm just gonna let it go through. Pull it towards me and go right over it. 1/2 inch seam allowance. Just keep up with your 1/2 inch seam allowance all around the perimeter of the blanket, okay? And as you can see, if you let the seam go towards you, don't even have to push it like I did. All you have to do is just hold your blanket like you would, like you're sewing, and it'll just tuck itself right in there because it wants to go in that direction, okay? The presser feet push it down, okay? So continue going. I'll go to the edge, the very corner, and I'll show you what that looks like. So when you get to the end of your fabric, you're going to stop about a 1/2 inch from the corner of your fabric, okay? So I'm gonna keep going, and I go very slowly. I just hold it down. That's about right. Now you see, here's my needle, and I still have about 1/2 inch of fabric sticking out. I'm gonna pick up my presser foot, turn my fabric. So I turn the corner because now I'm gonna go in the other direction, right? Go down the next side of my quilt. And we're gonna go all around, keeping that 1/2 inch seam allowance. and instead of having you sit here and listen to my sewing machine go brrr, I'm going to pause here, and when I come back I'll be at the very end of it. I want to show you how you end it off. Coming to the very end, I'm going to go and meet up where I began my stitching, where I did the reinforcement. So come right up to the corner of that, right where that's at. It doesn't have to be a perfect science. If you're off a little bit, that's fine, but come right up. I'm going to lift up my press foot, I'm going to turn it and bring it back down over that reinforcement a little bit, back it up. I'm gonna stitch it, oops, I'm gonna stitch in reverse a little bit. My machine has a button for that, which is awesome. I can also step on the presser foot, but I rather just let the button do it. And then come back forward just a little bit, and that's it. That's a good reinforced seam or stitch. We're gonna move that out, take that off, and we are done with the machine. So we're gonna turn that off. Okay, I'm gonna lay this down so you can kind of see what it looks like, and then we'll get to snipping. All I want to show you is that's it. I mean, the thing, it's put together. It looks good. We did the 1/2 inch seam allowance. So all we're gonna do now, I'm gonna crawl across here, sorry, is take your scissors, whatever scissors you have. If you have a spring-loaded scissor, that'd be even better, because this takes a minute. You're gonna take your scissor, and in each of your seam allowances is just trim like every 1/4 inch. Okay, so I'm gonna close up so you can see this on the camera better. Okay, so hopefully my SD card doesn't run out either. It looks pretty tight. All across every seam that you see, even around the very edge, you are going to come in and cut into the seam allowance a 1/4 inch. What I like to do is kind of tuck back the rest of the quilt, so all I have is that seam kind of sticking out, and just trim in a 1/4 inch. Now I'm not going to do too much of this because this is probably the most time consuming part of making the quilt, but I'm just showing you. And as you see, I'm staying away maybe less than 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch maybe away from the seam. The worst, or from your stitching. The worst thing you want to do is cut into it, and then what I would do is, if you know that you cut into it, you need to go to your machine and redo that stitch, because it will come apart. It'll open up. Okay, so after washing, it'll start coming apart. So if you do see that and you notice that you did clip into your stitches, just go to your machine right away and just go over that with a reinforced stitch. Okay. So anyhow, you're gonna go every 1/4 inch, and I just eyeball it. They're not perfect, because this, all you're trying to do is get the fabric to get kind of fluffy and open up, so that when you wash it, it makes that cool rag effect. Now when you get to your stitches like this, where they're all clumped together and it's this big clump of your seams that come together, I usually just clip to the right, to the left. I already did that one. To the left and to the right of that stitch, and I just leave this clumped, because it's going to open up anyway, and I don't really like to cut into it, just in case that cuts into a stitch that you don't want to be cut. So when you get to this clump, just go right to the left and to the right of it, 1/4 inch, and just keep going. Okay, and you're going to do this all around everything, this whole strip. Like I said, I push back the rest of the quilt, and I'll do a whole edge, and then I'll go then I'll go the opposite direction. And sometimes you'll have something like this where it's sewn down. You see that this is sticking out, but it's sewn down right here. On this one, I will come in right next to those stitches. I don't cut the stitches, but right next to them, and give it a clip. So now it's free. This is still sewn down, doesn't matter, because when this thing frays, the whole thing is going to kind of come up anyway. So just again, 1/4 inch, every stitch, all the way, every single seam that you see. Okay. Now when you're all done with all that, I usually do the interior, then I do the end very last. It looks kind of lame, because you're used to cutting like 4 or 8 or 12 layers of fabric. When you get to here, all you're going to have is just the 2 layers that are stuck together at the very end, but you're still going to clip it every 1/4 inch, okay, and not clipping any of your seams. You're just going to go and do that, for the whole, all around the whole edges. Okay, and when we're done with that, we're going to put it in the washing machine just for a few minutes. Just wash it by itself, because it's going to let go of a lot of the little fuzzies that it has, and then your quilt is going to bloom, as they call it. Okay, it just opens up and it looks awesome. So I'm going to continue doing this clipping, and then when we get back, we will wash it up. Okay, so I just finished pretty much all of the cutting. I just want to show you this Fisker scissor. It's called, well, it says Razor Edge. That's not the name of it, but it has a spring in it when you open it up. And this really helps. I'm telling you, when you start getting these rag quilts, especially if you like doing them, sorry, there's a bag in the way there, you're going to want something like this, because it is a lot of labor on your hands to go up, open and close, open and close. But I was going to show you, this is the very last, all around the edge. Like I said, I do all the inner parts of the quilt, and then I come around the edge, and every 1/4 inch, as best I can, cut that. when you get to the very corners, there's gonna be 4 of them, of course. You're gonna make a decision like here, what you want to do. I usually just cut to the very edge of where the 1/2-inch seam is going up, and on the other side, I just kind of come in and cut a little bit further in. It's gonna fray anyway, and it's just gonna look crazy, so it doesn't matter really what you do. So if you get to that point, you're kind of confused, just cut however you think you should. Okay. So let me show you real quick. The whole thing is cut, if you can tell. So what I'm gonna do now is put it in the wash by itself. And at the least amount of minutes your washer has, like only because you just want it to get wet and get kind of agitated, so that some of this, well, most of the little frill that's going to come out will, okay? Because you see it's already, if you kind of pick at it, it starts opening up. And what I do is I just sit this on my lap as I'm cutting it. Just another FYI, a little tip. Just sit on my lap while I'm watching TV or listening to TV, because you don't want to be watching the TV and cutting this and you might cut into it. But you know, just something, listen to the radio, listen to something on YouTube, and just have it on your lap and cut everything. This didn't take too long, but it took about 40 minutes. So I'm gonna get in the washer just with water and a little soap. I mean, use the smallest load you can, maybe 6 minutes as far as the actual time, as far as the agitation, and 1 rinse. And then we're gonna put it in the dryer. I'm gonna put it in the dryer also by itself. And you know, 30-40 minutes, however long it takes for it to dry, and then I'll show it to you then, because that's when it's really going to show what it does. Okay. Fun part. I just got it out of the dryer. Like I said, I washed it by itself for the lowest washing setting. You can, you know, it doesn't matter if it's delicate or just a fast wash, normal. It doesn't matter how you wash it. Just do the minimal time, because you really just want it to get wet and kind of open up. And then when I dried it by itself. It took about 40 minutes because it is flannel. But so let me bring it out so you can see. This is the funnest part, because I haven't even looked at it myself. So here we go. I'm going to try to back up just a little bit so you can see it better. So there's the blanket, you know, that we have been working on. And super cute. This one really, this fabric came from Joann's, and it's just their regular, you know, flannel print fabrics. It didn't let go of a lot of little fuzzies. Normally, I have to use a lint roller, so I brought my lint rollers out to show you. Just, you know, a regular lint roller. This is a craft lint roller, but it's basically the same as your regular lint roller. And I would take it and I would just go over the whole blanket just to kind of, you know, make it a little bit nicer, to get those little pieces of fluff off. But really, either the machine did a great job of knocking it loose, or it didn't lose very much anyway. So there it is. Let's see if you can see it a little bit better. And there's all that great rag effect. Super cute. And let's look at the back. I haven't done this yet. And I'm in my room now, so hopefully the lighting is still okay, but there it is. I mean, just looks, you know, like it should. The little edge is going to be kind of raggedy all around the very edges of the quilt on the back side, where it has the nice little patches. And let me show you how this was a much better, I can see already, job. See how these points match up perfect? They match up perfect. It's because I pinned them. So make sure that you pin them when you go in to sew your stuff. That way you get that nice matchup of your patches or your blocks. Okay. So thanks for watching. To be honest, this is a very basic rag quilt. I've done other ones where you offset it so that it's the diamond part is up, and you do it that way, so it's more of like a diagonal feel to the quilt. That one is much harder to do just because you have to kind of keep track of how you're doing it, but you just lay them out the same way, same pieces, you just lay them, set them in a different way so that they're on the diagonal, and it makes an awesome quilt. And those are the ones I usually like to make, like when it's a child's birthday or something like that. Something I know I'm going to work on for a little while because it takes a little bit longer. But if you're interested in seeing that, or how to do a quilt with the batting in the middle, so make it a thicker quilt, just let me know and I'd be glad to do that. Okay? So take care, guys. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.